Let's turn to Joy John now to discuss this meeting expected to happen between Trump and Zelensky. Plus, she'll touch on the Thai-Cambodia truce to end the border clashes. Joy is a global affairs analyst from Bellcrest Institute, Washington, D.C. Good to have you this weekend, Joy. Yeah, I hope that the snowstorm is not too bad in your area. Is it something to worry about? Is there travel issues as well in the U.S. from where you're joining? That's Washington, D.C.?
No, not a sight of snow here.
Now let's move to the topic in hand. Now, will the ceasefire agreement impact ongoing border demarcation efforts, or will it merely freeze the conflict in place, allowing Thailand and Cambodia to maintain their current territorial claims? We're beginning with the Thailand-Cambodia issue.
Yes. Well, thank you. This ceasefire will cause the fighting, but it doesn't resolve the border itself. What it does is to the long-standing border committees the breathing room to continue discussions without active combat on ground. But in that sense, it just keeps current positions in place while allowing technical talks behind the scenes on the demarcation to proceed.
So I'm just wondering, how effective can Asians observer team be in monitoring the ceasefire, and what consequences will there be if either side violates the agreement? This has happened before now when Trump, intervened, and we still had some clashes between the two sides.
Yes. So the observer teams will bring transparency and some, calm somewhat by reporting the activity on ground there. And the influence depends on continued cooperation from both sides. In answer to your question, if violations occur, the foreign ministers on both sides can then reconvene and exert diplomatic pressure to reinforce the agreement.
Clashes that have resulted in massive displacements such as this, what provisions can be in place to ensure the safe return of displaced civilians, and how can Thailand and Cambodia address the humanitarian needs of those affected by this conflict?
Well, part of the agreement calls for displaced civilians to return safely as the conditions allow, but the Asian partners will urge humanitarian corridors, and I say that because both governments are expected to coordinate, shelter, food, and medical care to meet the needs of the affected communities. So it's going to be an ongoing process, but both parties will need to be involved.
To the U.S. now, right? What role did international pressure, particularly from the United States and Malaysia, play in brokering the ceasefire? And will this influence, this whole influence, will it last a long time compared to what had happened a couple of weeks ago?
So it's hard to answer that in clear terms. International engagement, of course, was from Malaysia as the Asian chair, and support from the United States that helped keep both parties on the table there, and that attention from the external parties, encouraged the transparency and accountability. However, there is some window for progress and for us to permutate. But if maintained, I think it can reinforce commitments and some diplomatic momentum. But it's hard to really say a yes or a no.
Long-term implications. What are the implications of this ceasefire for regional security and the border Asian community, and will it lead to a more permanent resolution of the border dispute? Just finally, before we move to Ukraine.
Well, the ceasefire is a positive for regional stability, but a long-standing resolution here will depend on sustained dialogue, again, from both parties. For the ASEAN group, I think what it does is to reinforce the value of regional mechanisms and managing disputes, which may work to sustain future conflict prevention. But again, don't forget, this is not the first time they've had a ceasefire. This is not the first time they've been at the table. So we'll just have to watch how things unfold and how both parties cooperate.
Fingers crossed on that. Let's move to the Ukraine issue. He's met to, that's talking about Zelensky, of course, he's met to have a meeting with Donald Trump. That is this weekend in Florida. So let's talk about the deal breaker here. Will Ukraine's offer to withdraw troops from parts of Donetsk region is that enough to satisfy Russia's demands for territorial control? We know that just a couple of hours ago, Putin had, a massive attack on Kyiv. So, I mean, it seems like we're going back and forth with the bluffing about, ceasefire deal. Sometimes it's like we're singing this topic too much. But then what do you make of it?
Well, it's very hard to preempt Russia. We already know what the history says and what their position has been. Their state of position has gone beyond troop movement to claims of sovereignty over territory here. A limited withdrawal may lower tensions domestically there, but it does not resolve their broader demands and what they're asking for. I think what it does is to create space for talks and not a final settlement at all at this time.
So let's talk about security. Can the U.S. provide credible security guarantees to Ukraine without NATO membership, or is it just a paper promise?
U.S. can offer meaningful support through long-term military aid, intelligence sharing, and bilateral defense commitments. But that said, NATO's collective defense clause is unique. And I say this because any alternative guarantee will need sustained political will over time to be credible, and not just going by what they have on paper. It would need to be sustained over time and with political goodwill towards the cause.
Now, let's move to the question on, Putin's endgame. Is Russia genuinely interested in peace, or is this just a tactical move to regroup and continue aggression? Like I said, a couple of hours ago, we had, an attack, a massive one on Kiev. So what do you make of, Putin's move and his body language?
Body language is no good. Body language is dead on arrival, if I could say that on air. Pardon me if not. Because dealings with Putin have shown, have to be done with tact. History suggests caution in the sense that everything he has done, I refer to Putin, or I describe him as a chess master. For him, it's a game, because Russia has often used negotiations like this to stall, buy time and improve on its position. And in saying this, it doesn't mean outrightly that the ongoing talks are pointless. What I think it implies at this point is that the intentions should be judged by actions on ground. And going by what we've seen in the last few hours with the barrage of ballistic missiles across Kyiv, it's very difficult to say that Russia is genuinely interested in peace. I don't see that. And I think at this point, there is a gap here in trust. People don't really trust whatever Russia is saying or his team is saying, and trust is something that is earned over time. And in this case, there is no credibility with Putin, and it's going to be a very tough one, regardless of the talks that unfold tomorrow.
Okay, now let's go over to the U.S.'s leverage on this particular issue. What leverage does the U.S. have to pressure Russia into concessions given Trump's approval requirement for Ukraine's peace plan?
Yeah, so the United States controls key sanctions that affect Russia's access to money and markets. They also play a central role in determining the pace and support that Ukraine receives. So when you put these pieces together, it's just clear to see how much leverage the U.S. has in negotiations in the peace plan. However, when Zelensky meets with Trump, I will tell you that whatever he says in that meeting will have no effect on Russia. Russia is not willing or receptive to having someone else dictate when it stops the war, regardless of whatever pressure the United States government can mount on it. But Putin, on his own, is not ready to budge. We have seen action on land, sea, air. He will not budge. So Zelensky on this end is on his own with Trump. I don't see that whatever leverage the U.S. has rubs off on Putin.
I'm also wondering, right, Joy John, why is Europe not directly involved in the talks, and how will this impact the deal's legitimacy and implementation? Just last week, remember, we're chatting about the 90 billion euros that was going to be used by
Yes.
the Russian government to reconstruct some of the destroyed infrastructure in Ukraine. So, but then it seems like there's no direct influence from Europe when it comes to direct talks.
Yes, I actually thought about that as well, but I realized that Europe is not at the table directly because these negotiations are being led by Ukraine, Russia, and the United States, the trio. That said, European governments remain deeply involved behind the scenes through diplomatic channels and financial support. I will tell you that just before the meeting with Trump in Florida, Zelensky will be meeting virtually with European leaders, and that meeting is supposed to give him some assurance that, look, this is how to deal with Trump. This is how to what to expect, because we have a record of the previous meetings and the reactions from Trump. They will also reassure that they are standing behind Ukraine. But I will tell you that the legitimacy of any agreement will depend on all parties adhering to their commitments. And Europe's indirect role does not undermine that, though their continued engagement, will ensure coordination, oversight, and support. But again, it's one thing for them to meet and dialogue and hold or put up a framework, and another thing for Russia to come to the table with them.
Absolutely. Finally, before I let you go, Joy John, will Russia's leaders, this is something people are barely talking about, would the leaders face prosecution for war crimes, or should they face prosecution for war crimes, or will they get amnesty as part of a deal? I don't know if that is something that you've thought of as well, as this is going on.
So it's not in my little power to call for them to face such accountability, but I think that yes, they are legally accountable for war crimes, and institutions like the International Criminal Court exist to uphold that accountability. At the same time, in the context of peace negotiations, I think that discussions about amnesty could arise as part of a broader effort to end the conflict. I don't see that happening. How these decisions handled will influence both the immediate prospects from this conflict and the long-term pursuit of justice. Again, we're dealing with Russia. It is not this is an ongoing issue. I did mention earlier that it's more territorial now. It's not just about sovereignty. Yes, Ukraine is a sovereign nation, but Putin's demands are territorial, and he's not willing to budge. So it's going to be up to the International Criminal Court to uphold the accountability, see if they're going to be facing war crimes. Totally up to them, but it's going to be very interesting.
Joy John is a global affairs analyst, joined us from Washington, D.C. to discuss the Thailand-Cambodia issue and Ukraine's meeting with Trump tomorrow.